can't remember what year it was, but it was a pretty cold winter in New England. Our environmental friends had decided the wise idea, well, they didn't like it, that they would cut the limbs down off the trees. New England is like one huge forest. It is beautiful, but they didn't like it that they'd trim all the trees and take the limbs down. So they protested, and whatever fool decided to listen to them said, we're not cutting the tree limbs down off of the trees. An ice storm blew through Connecticut. It took all the tree limbs down. They fell onto the power lines. Most of Connecticut, if not all of it, was out of power for at least 7 days. Some people were out of power for 10 days. No electricity for at least 7 to 10 days. I think we were out for 7, maybe 8. Now, day one, when the electricity out wasn't really a problem, people seemed to think it was kind of novel. But by day 4 and 5, things were getting pretty squirrely. I was in the grocery store, and I started seeing people snatching food away when other people were going to get it. And there was plenty of food, but they were all getting wound up tight, and they were all getting very selfish and starting to act out. Everything started to fall to pieces. As I said, people were even grabbing food at the grocery stores from each other. Now, this is a picture of the world today that we live in. They were in darkness in Connecticut for 5-6 days, and they started to melt down. The world we live in at the moment is in the midst of darkness, a moral darkness. And we all know what's going on out here. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah would be ashamed of some of the things that are going on in this country at the moment, morally. But it's moral darkness. We've got criminal darkness. We've got gangs in Colorado from Venezuela taking over whole housing complexes. And that's just what we know about, the tip of the criminal darkness that we're living in. And of course, we've got relationship darkness, or relational darkness. We've got families that are falling apart around us. We've got men abandoning their wife and kids when they feel like doing it, or wives running off on their kids and their husbands because they fall in love with someone else. And the relationships with our neighbors are not good. We got people fighting over the most foolish things that go on with their neighbors on an endless basis. And then also in this country, we've got racial hatred, and that's being fueled by a wicked administration and political parties who see some kind of gain out of it. But they're trying to drive a wedge between our black brothers and sisters and us, or our Hispanic brothers and sisters and us. It's wicked, but it's darkness. And of course, as we just mentioned, that all flows from a political darkness. And some of the darkness here is that men are putting their hope in men. In the midst of the deep darkness the nation's in, they're looking towards men to help them, to bring them out of it. And there's no more foolishness than that. And then lastly, we've got religious darkness going on. We got churches setting up their own little kingdoms, their own little fiefdoms in Christendom, revolving around one or two very spiritual men. Or we've got these other other groups that are now embracing this rainbow religion, this wickedness of the alphabet people, this cult of mutilated children. And now we've even got churches who are flying these rainbow flags and saying this kind of stuff needs to be embraced. It's darkness out there. Darkness. But when the power went out in New England for those 7 to 10 days, my family wasn't in the dark. I don't know how I did it, probably by Connie's persuasion, but we had bought a generator and we had it hardwired into the system. So when everybody's lights went out, we went out, cranked up that generator, and we had light throughout the whole house. All the essentials were running. We had the light, and that light gave us life, in a sense, that we could get on with life while everyone sat in the midst of the darkness around us. And Christians, for us, it's the very same thing today. We live in a dark world. As we said, there's moral darkness, there's criminal darkness, there's political darkness and religious darkness. But we live in the light of Christ, in the light of Jesus. Not only do we have the light of Christ individually through the Holy Spirit that we received in our baptisms, living in us and lighting us up from within. Jesus says that we are the light of the world. We are the light of the world. Not that we should be the light of the world. Not that we could be the light of the world. We are the light of the world in the midst of this darkness. And of course, it's because of him. Of course, it's nothing to do with us being better than other people. But regardless, we need to remember who we are. In the light, we are the light of the world, according to Jesus. He says this, a city on a hill cannot be hidden. He's talking about multiple people here. He's talking about the church as the city on the hill. This is a togetherness in the light, a community light. That's who we are. And we can't forget the togetherness here. We live in a country that's obsessed in Christendom with individual spiritual growth. You don't get that from the Bible. You don't get that from Christ. He came to create a church, a togetherness in him, a city on a hill that brightens up the dark world around us. There was no electricity in the time of Jesus. And at times we forget that. I was pondering this the other day as I was fishing. What would it have been like to travel through the night in Israel at the time of Jesus? I think it would have had to have been like a Lord of the Rings experience, like going through Mordor. There was wild animals there. As you know, I'm afraid of every animal on the planet. Even rabbits, they can't kill you, but that's not 100%. It's not 100%. Not many people have died by them, but doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. Can you imagine what was prowling around in Israel or in Nazareth or where Jesus was born at night? Big cats, dangerous animals, things that would savage you. Can you imagine traveling at night while things were stalking you? And then the whole place was riddled with robbers. They didn't have the law and order that we have here. They didn't have the good road system we have here. They were traveling at night in the darkness with their lives being threatened. Can you imagine with your whole family? They maybe would have ventured out in groups. You could have been attacked by a wild animal or robbed by bandits and lost your very life. Can you imagine doing that in the pitch darkness? Can you imagine traveling and then you see Jerusalem, a city on a hill, as you've traveled through Mordor for hours and you see it's all lit up? Can you imagine that sight? How would you feel? How would you feel after maybe days of traveling and traveling in the deepest, scariest darkness, and there is a city on a hill, a beacon, bright light in the midst of the darkness? You'd have to feel encouraged by that, wouldn't you? You'd have to feel, we're nearly there. We're nearly there. The relief would wash over you. All the things that you were afraid of in the night, well, all of those would have faded into the background. The danger's nearly over. You'd feel safe. There's no more stress. You'd feel secure because now you're gone into a civilized area where there's no bandits. You'd feel peace. You'd unload the burden of your anxiety. That's how I would feel. I think you'd feel the same. The country as we know it, the world around us is in deep darkness at this moment. And the effect that it's having on everybody around you is terror and fear and anxiety and confusion and uncertainty. And the effect of that, well, people could start acting up. They could start getting violent, start acting erratically. But we need to remember that in the middle of this darkness, people are asking questions. They're asking, where is the light? Where is the light in this darkness? And Jesus answers that question and says this, it's you, Christian. It's us together in the midst of this dark world that is the city on the hill. You and I. We are here to shine this light to everyone around us in the midst of the darkness, because that's what they're looking for. We're here to let Christ shine through us, and He's doing it. Listen, He's doing it. He's doing it. He's doing it through you. Never question that. Don't ask yourself, well, I'm of no effect in this world. Together with God's people, you are the light, the only light that this world has at the minute. And we may be getting darker as we go into this election. But that's going to make us shine even brighter. Do you know, I wasn't always a Christian. I honestly didn't believe them. I came to a point where I questioned the Christians about their faith. They were all baptizing people. They were becoming Christians. I said, I'm not down for this. I don't believe you. They couldn't answer some questions I had. It wasn't their fault. They weren't equipped for the job. So off I went. Off I went into the darkness. And boy, I went deep. I went deep into the darkness. But you know what? Even when I was in the darkness, I knew that the Christians had the right way of life. I didn't believe them, but I knew that they had the right way of living. I looked at them and I knew that they treated each other differently than the dark world that I was living in. And that they treated even those that weren't Christians differently. And I knew, even in the midst of my darkness, that that's where the light lay. See, they loved one another. You could see it as they fellowshiped together. And the more I was in the darkness, the more I saw that they were different than the darkness. It was their love for one another. And they loved and they cared for me. Even in my wickedness. They loved and they cared. And that was the light that was bright. I wasn't following, but when I decided to, I knew the direction to go. In all the moral and religious chaos of darkness that we live in today, the light still shines, brothers and sisters. And it shines to those who are in the darkness. And it shines through us. And it shines through you. That's the light of Christ. That's what you're doing, Christian. As you follow Christ, you're a light in the midst of the darkness. Because even in the midst of this chaos, we know where we're going. We know the direction we're going. We know how to live, and that is to love one another and to love everyone around us, regardless of who they are. And this work is jugular that you're doing, that we're doing, that we must persevere in, because there is no other light for this country that is in the midst of the darkness but Jesus the Christ, showing himself to the world through you and through us. We need to remember and not underestimate who is watching us at this time in history. We're being watched by all those around us who are in the darkness. They're watching you and they're evaluating, is the light lie here? Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to win them by our example. It's a lie. They're not going to ask you why you're different. Paul and the apostles didn't go into the towns and act differently than everybody else. And they just came up and said, "Oh, wow, Paul, I see that you're different from everybody else." They went in and they preached the good news. The light was shone through the truth of the proclamation of the gospel. So as we love one another, and as we love a world that's in the darkness, we must, as his people, together proclaim the light of the world is Jesus the Christ. That he died for our sins, that he was buried, that he rose again on the third day, that he's coming again to raise all men from the dead and to judge the wickedness of this world. But there's good news. There's salvation in him. There's forgiveness of sins in him. And that he's going to wrap up this whole period of man's history and he's going to bring it together successfully. And this thing we know is life will end well. It'll end well. It's dark now. But the dawn is coming. When Christ comes, kingdom of light, Revelation says there will be no night there. We've got good news for this world around us. Someone says, well, it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't seem like we're the light of the world. Jesus never said it would, did he? Well, you're going to feel like you're the light of the world. Wrong answer. It's going to seem like you're the light of the world. Wrong answer. Christ said that you are the light of the world. So we have to accept what he says, and not how we feel, or not how it seems. Someone says, well, I don't think the light of Christ is shining in me enough. I understand. I feel the same way. But this isn't about feelings, right? It's about facts. Someone says, I want him to shine more in me. Well, that's good. He has plans for that. This work that he started in you, he's going to bring to completion. But we have to realize that the plan that he has for us is a cross-shaped plan. It's the shape of a cross. See, Jesus never shone more than when he laid his life down on the cross for us all. The love of Christ is seen in the crucifixion. And the love for his enemies is seen in the crucifixion. And that's the brightest light that there is. So if we're going to shine more, we better get ready for a cross. We better get ready for hardship. We better get ready for suffering. We better get ready for excruciating pain. Because that's what the cross is about. I want to shine for Christ. Let us take up our cross and follow him. But it's important for us to keep in mind that all of this suffering of the cross, all of the pain and the agony and the trials that we're going through and will be going through is not meaningless. It's not without purpose. There's a reason for it. Back in New England, when the whole place was in darkness and we sat in the midst of the light, it came to my attention, our neighbor, he had no power at all. And so what we did, we ran a line over to his house from the generator, and he got light too. Now, of course, we charged him for that, right? I mean, hey, someone's got to pay for the gas. And now I can milk my neighbor for that, right? Or I would limit it. No, we wouldn't. Why would we do that? Because we love our neighbor as ourselves. Listen, keep in mind that the light shines in you as you carry the cross, and it's all to light up the lives of our neighbors. All your suffering, all of your pain, all of your agony, everything you're going to go through and are going through is that neighbor in the darkness might have the light of Christ. Might have the light of Christ. Because when you carry your cross and you arrive into work, Christ and the light shines through you. When you're carrying your cross and you go to the cookout with people you don't particularly want to be with, the light of Christ is shining through you. When you go to any social occasion, if you're at the coffee shop or the restaurant, if you're working with the client, as you carry the cross, the light of Christ is shining through you and through me. And it's bringing the light into the darkness of those around us. And if they're willing, and let me tell you, there's a lot of people assessing where they stand with the Almighty at the moment. If they're willing, they can have this light of Christ come into them. When they repent of their sins, when they put their faith in Jesus of Nazareth, when they are baptized into union with him, they receive the gift of the Holy Spirit, they receive the forgiveness of sins, and they come into the community of light, the church, the city on a hill that can't be hidden. Let me wrap it up here. What we said today is we live in the moral darkness at the moment, a world that is consumed by criminal darkness and political darkness and religious darkness. And the effect of that, well, people are terrified. They have anxiety, they're confused, they're uncertain. But the people are also asking, where is the light? And the good news is, in the midst of the darkness, Christ says, we are together as his people, the light of the world. We enlighten and bring moral and spiritual light into the lives of unbelievers around us. And that's not because of anything in and of ourselves, but it comes down to Christ, who is everything, shining through us. How do we shine better? In the supper, he brings us back to where the light shines the brightest. He brings us back to the cross. He brings us back to the way to conquer the darkness. And that is to take up our cross and follow him. And that's what he's doing today. As we take this bread and this fruit of the vine, Jesus himself instituted this. And he is present here. And he's saying, will you follow me? Will you choose to follow me and shine the light of Christ into this dark world? And as we take this bread, as we take this fruit of the vine, we're saying to him, yes, we will.